LJ Church of Christ in LJ, Georgia presents a devotional discussion designed to help you stimulate your thinking on important topics in your Christian walk. Join us for the Roundtable Devotional Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to another of our Roundtable Devotional Podcasts. We're glad to be here with you tonight. I'm one of the hosts, Caleb Sampson, and with me, as always, is Jeremy Green. How you doing tonight, Jeremy?
I'm doing well. Glad to be back after a week hiatus, and looking forward to tonight and the rest of the year.
And speaking of the rest of the year, I think you put in the bulletin we were going to be announcing some news tonight. What do you have for us, Jeremy?
Well, first off, how about this new set we got going on? Right, this is makeshift. All Caleb's
work in progress. Don't judge it yet. It'll get better. If you're listening on iTunes or one of our podcast sources, we've moved into a slightly different space temporarily, long term, whatever, and we're working on. Trying to spruce it up a little bit so you don't have all the books behind us, but it's a work in progress.
Yeah, Caleb's the mastermind of set design, production, direction. I just kind of sit here, so Caleb's going to have us looking good. But we've been talking about for a while kind of the best way to go about doing this, and you know, kind of having participation and involvement. We started this obviously as something for the local church here at LJ, but something that lots of other people could get a lot out of as well. And so what we're going to do kind of the rest of the year is we're going to have different members of the LJ church and maybe some surrounding guests as well come and be a part of this. And really what we're going to do is kind of get them to share maybe their favorite verse, favorite passage, and let's talk about that and what it means to them and look at it in context. And so we'll spend each week sort of looking at those verses. And then towards the holidays, we're going to have, some of our family members on, our wives, if we can talk them into it, and kids. If we got all your kids on here, we're going to need a lot bigger table.
We need a bigger table and a bigger room.
But we want this to be something that's enjoyable and something that we get a lot out of. And so I'm looking forward to that and more interaction. And so I think that'll be good.
Excellent. I definitely think it will. If you've been following along on all the episodes so far, we've talked about faithfulness and love in several different episodes, and we've talked about forgiveness and all these different various things that really are important for us always, but especially coming out of sort of the most unusual times that we've been in lately. And today's lesson or study for this evening, we're going to be looking at the topic of encouragement. And, you know, I think we all could use some encouragement. I think it's something that it's easy to get discouraged. It's one of the tools that I think the devil is the most effective with at getting us discouraged, whether it be the surroundings that we're in or people that disappoint us or all sorts of different things. And so we're going to be looking at encouragement this evening.
Yeah, and you know, we're living in a very discouraging time. It just seems like that this year has just been crazy, right? You know, we've started with a global pandemic, you know, and we're still not out of it yet. I think slowly we're sort of getting back to some normal things, and it's still a strange world. Though I have seasonal allergies going on, and I'm almost scared to cough because anytime you cough around anybody, they're going to say, "Oh, you know, what's going on?" But I'm going to take this opportunity to do that. But you also, you know, you've got strange things going on. Wildfires out in California. I was looking at some pictures just this morning on ESPN of the Oracle Park out in San Francisco, where there's just almost the sky looks orange because of smoke and all the things going on with the wildfires there. And we were sort of joking about in Knoxville, there's been a tiger sighting where there's tiger, you know, the murder hornets. You know, it seems like every time we turn on the news, something wild and crazy. But realistically, the stress of this pandemic, first off, has been discouraging. We missed a number of times meeting together, and there are some people that are still having health concerns. Lives have been lost, due to this virus. And so, on top of that, it's election season, which is stressful a lot of times, and political divides show up. And there's just a number of things that make this a very discouraging time. And so, as Christians, we want to be part of society. We want to engage, and we watch the news. And anytime you watch the news, you get on social media, you leave with sort of this feeling of being down all the time. And maybe that's just me, but do you sort of feel that way too, that the more you engage in the world, the more it sort of brings you down?
Oh, definitely. Especially some of the dialogue that's going on of people fighting back and forth on whether it be politics is a big one right now, or to mask or not to mask, or it seems, and that's one of the challenges where we're especially on social media, maybe now more than ever, because people are more isolated, that the anonymity of being able to post whatever you want, and you're protected behind the screen of your computer, something you would never say to someone's face, but you feel bold enough to say it when you type it on a keyboard, and probably not processing the full weight of some of the things that we say at times. So I definitely feel that. And you walk. I think I've been on social media maybe less lately than I have in other times, because it is very discouraging, and people are at each other, and there's so many different dynamics of things going on in our world today.
Yeah, I saw this quote that I really liked the other day, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me, so I have to paraphrase, but it was basically saying that a lot of times as Christians, we're concerned with being at the center instead of being on the left or the right politically, and it said that that's not our goal ever. Our goal is to be something completely different and transformative as Christians. That not that we can't engage, and not that we don't perform our civil duty. I'm not saying any of that, but what it is saying is that we're just supposed to be different than everybody else. And a lot of what we're seeing on social media and in conversation is not different. It's taking sides, and it's being almost almost confrontational in the way that we do things, and that's not what we want. And so we thought we'd take a little time this evening and talk about encouragement. And where we want to start is Hebrews 10. And, Caleb, you and I both preached through Hebrews. We taught through it actually last year with some teenagers. I know you had some discussions with our teens when you moved here. And I taught this in an auditorium class. It's been 3 or 4 years ago now. And, the idea of Hebrews being something better, and Jesus specifically being better than the old law. And there's all these statements, 13 of them, as a matter of fact, these let us statements. Let us do these things, and let us do this. And you can go through and do a whole series of lessons on those. But when we get into chapter 10, verse 24, there's a let us here. And talk a little bit about the verse and as we kind of break it down.
Well, Hebrews 10:25 is probably one that people know right offhand more often than Hebrews 10:24. And yet they're really tied together in context. Hebrews 10:25, it talks about attendance and not forsaking the assembly. And we like to take that verse and say, hey, you need to be here. But verse 24 really is about sort of the weight of being together and the weight of encouraging each other. And so it says there, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. The idea of stirring up one another to love and good works, that's kind of unusual terminology, to stir up to love. If we're talking about stirring people up in other ways, I know enough about you, Jeremy, that I probably could push your buttons a little bit if I wanted to get your goat or whatever, and you know what buttons to push with me, and it's easy to pick out what things would get somebody fired up or riled up or tease them about various things. But when it comes to stirring, how do we provoke someone to love? Jeremy, how do you feel like we can go about stirring or provoking someone to love and good works?
Yeah, so it's interesting that phrase is actually only used twice in the New Testament. It's used a couple times in the Septuagint, which of course is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, but once in Deuteronomy and I think once in Jeremiah. But it's a very interesting phrase there, to stir one another up. The NIV there in verse 24 says to spur one another on, and it means to to incite or provoke or to wound someone to the point that they have to respond. So the other place that it's actually used in the second definition, where it talks more about anger and responding, is in Acts 15 when there's that sharp disagreement between Paul and Barnabas over John Mark, and that it was almost to the point where it was to the point where there was no fixing it. Excuse me. But here in the context, it's I want to challenge you in a way that you have no choice but to respond to it. And I think that's how I've always thought about preaching. As our job as preachers is to be stirring the pot, right? To constantly be getting up where the lesson, it's not just informative, although that's part of it. That at the end of the lesson, whether it's good or bad, you have to respond in some way. And so as it talks about encouraging here, it's that I need to be willing to stir my brother or sister up to the point where they don't have a choice but to do something about it. And in that first phrase that's used there, let us consider. It's one that's more common in the Greek New Testament, but it actually means to give thoughtful consideration to, or almost to consider up and down, to meditate on something, to weigh the options of something. And so when I read that verse, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, it's that I'm sitting around and I'm thinking about the best way to handle this situation and the best way to encourage and challenge my brother or sister. So when we read this is not a the comparison has been made a lot about whether you go in and you're going to tear out a wall. Let's say we're going to tear out a wall. Well, you take a sledgehammer to it. But if you're going to perform surgery, you find a more delicate instrument. You go in and you see a surgeon's scalpel and they make a slight incision. And so that's what this is to me, is this game of encouragement, or this act of encouragement is not something where we just go and slap somebody on the back and say, hey, how are you? It's where we deliberately and intentionally say, okay, what can I do to refocus and reshift away from this negativity and put the focus on something that's positive and challenge us to love and good works.
One of the things that I think that the church as a whole, I think we really focus on friendliness, but not necessarily encouragement. And we try to be friendly. We try to give a pat on the back. We try to say hello to people and give a smile and how are you doing? And we just give that surface answer of, oh, I'm good. How are you? And it's just kind of this verbatim thing that we just go back and forth with. But that deeper connection, in order to consider one another, I have to know something about you. There's a general way that we can encourage each other, but in order for me to really figure out what buttons to push to stir Jeremy up or to stir whoever up, I've got to get to know them. And that's the only way we can bear each other's burden. That's the only way that we can really be the church that God has called us to be. And so when we think about ways that, hey, I wonder, how can I influence them for love and good works? How can I? It really takes thought. It takes intention. And so when we go about doing that, there's a lot of different ways. And toward the end of this lesson this evening, we're going to look at some of the practical ways that we can accomplish that. But it kind of ties back in with the lesson we did a few weeks ago on love and brotherly love. When Jesus says, "By this the world will know that you're my disciples indeed, if you have genuine love for the brethren." That degree of love really, when we show it through love and good works, that's how the world can see that we're different, that we're real, genuine disciples, is when we're encouraging each other and kind of almost that idea of leveling up. That hey, I'm gonna figure out a way to encourage you, and in doing so, it's going to cause you to do love and good works. And when I see your love and good works, it's going to inspire me to do more love and good works, and it just keeps growing and building. And so these are things that I think are so vitally important.
Yeah, and the consequences of discouragement, I think, are evident. So when you look at what's going on in context here, okay, let's stop right here. Caleb, who wrote Hebrews?
We don't know.
Oh.
Possibly Barnabas, which would be the son of encouragement.
Okay, interesting.
Possibly, there's a list of people, but many people think Paul, based on the style of writing, and
Other folks have been posited Apollos, Priscilla,
Possibly Apollos. Yep.
But just wanted to put you on the spot for a second. Sorry.
Thanks.
But you look at the context. This is being written to a group of people who are mired in discouragement. These are people who are in danger of falling away, who are needing encouragement. One could argue that's the whole purpose of the book, to encourage people to get back in a closer relationship with Jesus. And so here, when it says that, it's challenging then in context to get back to where you're supposed to be. And so I don't think this is taken lightly. And there is some, I think, modern application of the entire book of Hebrews here, because I'm not saying that we as a church are in danger of falling away. And I mean, when I say church, I mean globally. I don't think that the church is in a struggle that way. But there is definitely some discouragement. The one measurable that all churches have to say, hey, we're doing well or we're not doing well, is attendance. Well, now that's not a measurable, because attendance is down everywhere, because people are staying home to protect themselves from illness and whatnot, and struggling with large groups and social distancing. And so that one measurable that we've always had there is, we're not able to do that. And so there are some discouraging elements and aspects. And so we're trying to say, okay, how can I get back to doing that? And so, you talked about some practical ways. And so let's sort of bounce some practical ways off of each other here. And the first one, I think, comes from verse 25, which is, of course, a well-known verse. It says, this is from the NIV, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. There's our word, right? And all the more as you see the day approaching. And so I think the first way is being together. And, there's this great debate going on now about attendance. Well, if you're online, are you in attendance? Well, of course. I think that if you're engaged in that, you're in attendance. But I think the first way that we just can encourage one another is being together, whether it's a Zoom call or a text or whatever. Being together is the first area where we're responsible for encouraging one another.
Yeah, the presence together. It pre-pandemic, if that's a word. The idea of when people weren't in attendance, it can be discouraging. You show up on a Sunday morning and half the auditorium is gone camping or wherever they're at for the weekend. That can feel a little discouraging pre-pandemic. Now, afterward, there's a whole lot of other things included in the idea of who should be in attendance and who's not, and it's hard to say at times, if people are quarantining and things like that. But the benefit of being together in the same place, the singing together, the sound, it's designed to worship God, but it edifies each other, and so as we're in Bible class together, asking questions and being able to hear someone else say, well, I struggle with this, or here's my thoughts. And there's so much richness to the aspect of our worship together that's not just it's not just one directional as it goes to God, but it's multi-directional in edification and encouragement of building each other up.
Yeah, that's a big deal. It's funny you mentioned camping. So last week, right before I got up to preach, by the way, do not look at your phone during worship. Let me put that out there. I have done it occasionally. It's a bad habit. We shouldn't do it. But I got this picture of a large group that were on a camping trip. It was Labor Day. It was a holiday. And they were all there, because of the live streaming capabilities we had. They were worshiping together in that way, and so I think that is a special experience. I think that's great. I think that when you're able to still engage and do that, I think that's wonderful. And I think that's certainly not what's being talked about here.
Right.
But there is that element of you wouldn't want that every weekend, right?
Right.
You wouldn't want half your church to say, yeah, we're going to go camping every weekend, and we'll catch y'all on YouTube.
Well, and remember the feeling when after we completely shut everything down, and that first Sunday when we all came back together, people were in tears, and certain songs were more moving than others because of the fact of what we'd just been through, it's so meaningful being together, and maybe that out of the pandemic, people have realized just how valuable it is being a community of faith together, and being in presence with one another, and certainly, even though we're separated, there's other ways that we can stir each other up to love and good works. In putting thought into it, we may even have to put more thought into it now, because they haven't been at services for 2 or 3 months and it's because they're, avoiding because of health concerns, how can I stir them up to love and good works when I can't physically be with them?
Yeah, and I think that brings me to another sort of practical thing here, and that is, and you mentioned this earlier, relationship building. Mm-hmm. So, it's interesting. You're still somewhat new here, I guess. You've been here a few months now, and one of the hard things about moving to a new place is learning who people are, especially now when there's people, you haven't seen their faces. And, I know you're like me. We go through the directories and we try to put names and faces together and who's who. But one of those areas that we really encourage each other is relationship building, because, if I don't know what makes you tick or what you like or who your family members are or what your background is, it's hard for me to say, hey, I want you to be encouraged. I want you to do better. Blah. It's hard to stir you up if I don't really know you. Mm-hmm. And so I think much more, and use that word surface, which I think is really important, much more than a surface knowledge of who you are. There needs to be that deep relationship building before there can be encouragement.
Right. And there's the movie that came out a long time ago, and I've preached different lessons on it before, of paying it forward. It's interesting if you go through the drive-through line and somebody in front of you pays for your meal, and you get to the window and they say, well, the person in front of you took care of it. Oftentimes that'll keep going. The next person will say, well, okay, I'll pay for the person behind me, and it just becomes this thing that is a good work that inspires other people to do good works. And I think that is included in this concept that one of the ways that I can stir someone else up to good works is if I do a good work to you. If I go and help someone, or someone sees me help someone, there's some really kind of tear-jerking commercials that are out there where, somebody, drops their groceries and somebody else stops and helps them pick it up. And somebody is witnessing that as they walk by, and it causes them to smile at someone, and that person smiles back at them, and then they walk down the street and do something nice to someone else, and it just continues to be this chain reaction of somebody else did something good to me, and it just kind of a natural response that we look for an opportunity to do good to someone else, and so it can be one of those things that really keeps going, and also beneficial to the church. Barnabas, we mentioned, named son of encouragement. And the first instance we see of him is him doing a good work and selling his land and bringing it to the apostles and giving it to them to be able to distribute to the needs of the church. That's a huge deal. It's something that people look at and go, man, that's amazing to see that happen. And it causes other people to do the same. Unfortunately, one of the instances that we see not too long after that is Ananias and Sapphira, that like the attention that was brought probably from that type of mindset, and so they bring the money, and we all know the story of what happens to them. But the idea of good works is something that can be contagious.
Yeah, and encouragement, I think, something you said right then, it has to be genuine, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You can't be a fake encourager.
Right.
That's seen through very quickly, and so that's important. I remember when I was in high school. One of the elders taught our Bible class, and I don't think he was an elder then, but and he challenged us for a month to do these, what he called random acts of kindness. And I know that was kind of a big thing back then that people did, and but it was interesting. And you had to come in and literally talk about, I think it was one a day we were supposed to do, a random act of kindness, that you did for somebody. And so when you did those things, there was that element of relationship building that, even if you just hold the door for somebody or what, you have changed the dynamic in that relationship. And so I'll never forget, one of the things that I did as part of my random act was one of our elders at that point was in his 80s, and he had a birthday. And I remember calling him on the phone and telling him happy birthday. And I was maybe 13 or 14 as a kid. And so like, that changed our relationship for the rest of the time that I knew him, because just as a teenager, in the youth group, sometimes there's not a lot of interaction with the elders that I had called to tell him happy birthday. And so every time I saw him from moving forward, there was a pat on the back or like almost a knowing smile on his face that our relationship changed. And so anything that we can do to grow those relationships is beneficial.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And there's all sorts of ways that can be done. And really, we could go on and on for quite a while trying to figure out all the different ways that we could go about encouraging. And maybe that's something that is kind of a good homework item for those that are watching and listening. Thinking about ways that you personally can stir up other people to love and good works, and how to go about that. And it's easy to be discouraged and to pass on discouragement. But I think probably if we asked our audience, most people would say, who do you like to be around? And more often than not, it's someone who is an encourager, who's upbeat and positive and happy, more so than someone who's always down and always saying, listen to my problems and always discouraged about things. I think we probably all gravitate towards encouraging people. And so the message of Christianity is one that is an encouraging message of joy and hope, and something to look forward to and to long for. And so as we go through life, we should be a people who are spreading optimism and encouragement because we understand what's been done for us. And so just some encouragement, hopefully, for you to be encouraged today as we look through the Word. And there's so many different places that we could go and delve deeper into what encouragement is. But hopefully our audience spend some time thinking about ways that they can put it into practical application.
Yeah, and I want to share this passage as we get ready to wrap up here from 1 Thessalonians 5:11. And contextually, it's exactly what you were just talking about, that hope and that rests in Jesus. In 1 Thessalonians 5:11, after he's been talking about the day of the Lord, Paul says, therefore, so because of these things, right, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. So it's that idea that because we know the joy of Christianity, let's build each other up in that way. And there is certainly a level of trust that goes into the situations that we're in. One of my favorite passages, we're talking about favorite verses, is the 3rd Psalm, and it talks about David completely having to trust in God as Absalom is trying to take over his throne and usurp his father's authority. And David says, basically, I ended up having to just lay down and go to sleep and rely on the Lord to wake me up the next day. And so I think when we're completely reliant on God and we're resting in that hope, and that will help us to be more encouraging in that way. And so anyway, there's a lot more that could be said, but it's that challenge to always build each other up that matters.
Definitely. Well, we hope that today you've been benefited by looking at Hebrews 10:24 and think of ways that you can pass this on, and hopefully we can develop a culture of encouragement as the things that we do encourage others, and the things that others begin doing continues to build on one another. Let's go to God in prayer before we close. Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this day. We're thankful for the opportunity to be able to discuss your word, and Father, your word is so rich and full of ways to encourage us and ways to strengthen us, and there's so much that we can learn and the depth of your knowledge. And Father, I pray that you help us to be a people who look to the needs of others. Forgive us when we fall short and when we focus on self and when we're not being the church that you've called us to be. Help us to live daily for you and to know that times of discouragement will come, but that we can get through it and have brothers and sisters around us who help draw us up out of the pit and help us to be in that right mindset. And Father, I'm thankful for your church and especially for your Son, Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. Amen. We ask that you like, share, and subscribe. And if you have topic suggestions for us, please contact us. You can find out more about us at the lajchurchofchrist.org. Also, this is available in video on our YouTube page, our Facebook page, and on Instagram. You also can listen to the podcast version, just the audio, in iTunes, on the Play Store, and at Anchor FM and several other podcast apps. Thank you for tuning in.